Hello and welcome to WPF Season 11 Power Rankings. These are for Defense Division. I am Etesian and joining me is...
Hi. How are you doing?
Right then, so let's start with the usual disclaimer. Power Rankings are always going to be subjective, and fortunately this time there is no failure. There is no draft that I can look at and say this will not function. All of these teams have a fair chance of competing against anyone else. What's going to matter the most is the player behind the teams. And it was quite difficult to figure out some of these rankings in the end, so if you're number one and you don't end up winning the whole thing, alright. If you land last on power rankings and you win the whole thing, hell yeah, live your best life.
Yeah, rankings do not correlate to skill or how you will perform. So keep that in mind and have a good season.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. This order of teams is gonna be from the bottom to the top, so let's just get that right out of the way.
Mhm.
Our worst team this season is MightyBarb's Yendys Sylveons. The team is on screen, you can see it, and do you want to start us off with this one, Wheat?
I can start us off with this one. So just a few things that we have down is this team has so much potential for setup threats. There's so many scary mons, but they need that turn to, a lot of them need that turn to set up. And that can take some issues. We got the Infernape, the Suicune, the Dragonite, the Snorlax are all really scared Zam, and then they got Roarville to support them, which is it's both a help and a hindrance on this team. But altogether, it's a very scary, almost like hyper offense, hyper setup team.
Yeah, the reason we have this team as the lowest is that it's simply it's essentially forced to set up to really be a notable team. Like, this team can play neutral well enough, but there's no immediately huge breakers aside of choice things and the Mega Absol. And on top of that, this team can't really play the long game that well because while it does have some recovery limitedly here and there, its only removal is a Dragonite and it's a Hail
Mm-hmm.
team. So there's also the factor that that Dragonite is either gonna have to choose between boots or goggles, but there's always going to be something that threatens its multi-scale. Like, that ability is almost never going to be active. This
Yeah, so
team
it's going to be.
otherwise,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Alright. This team is otherwise quite solid. It has a lot of good things going for it, but it does have some. Those are its main flaws, and it also has some issues with type coverage, like how Mega Steelix is the only flying check, the only normal check. It's. Yeah, it's just rather reliant. Also, it's a bit limited on the immediate. No, it's. Yeah, it's fine. It's a fine team. This team can definitely compete, but it does not have one big eye catching thing, unlike all of the other teams we have here. And that's simply why it's the lowest ranking.
Yeah, this team will catch a team off guard with any one of its setup mons in a matchup, but besides that, breaking is going to be really tough. And if it loses pressure, which low momentum, and it's going to be tough for this team. Okay, moving on.
Alright,
Um,
next up is gonna be Harbor's team, the Snowpoint Snorunts.
mm-hmm,
And this team is almost a really good team. Like, I'm looking at
mm-hmm.
those top three, what they can do offensively. I'm looking at the Venus, Sylveon, Porygon, Rune, Melmetal defensive core, and that's all very good, but you can't really talk around those speeds.
Yeah. There's a couple issues with speed. Your top end being Garchomp at 102 isn't great. Not having a ground resist and the only immunity being Thundy isn't great. And I know Pori and Ryun can take hits on the physical side, but you don't always want that. Um,
Yeah, the raw physical
Removal.
bulk can make up for some things, but ultimately that can get worn down. You are giving Porygon more work to do, more chances for it to get knocked off. Melmetal
Mm-hmm.
has no recovery, etc. And there's
Sylveon
also
is a really good cleric here, though.
Yeah, Sylveon is a
I
very
will
good
note that.
cleric, and Venu Porygon having manual recovery is also nice, so this team can
Mm-hmm.
definitely be quite a threat, but the speed is a huge problem in 102 being your fastest, and then, you're probably gonna scarf that Garm a lot of the time, then Venu doesn't run speed, nobody preps for Sylveon, so you basically have a 95 to nothing speed gap.
Yeah, and then coming back to that Darm or the Garm, if you're scarfing it all the time, your biggest issue is your removal is only Thundi T. And that's a really big issue, taking 25% every time you come in.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. This team does have two grounded poison types and solid hazard settings, so there's a decent chance that they force the opponent to defog for them, but if you don't really stack up spikes against them, they might just be content to leave hazards on the board to wear down that Garm.
Yes. Okay, moving on to number 14.
Right, that's gonna be Lumberjack and the accuracy check, they say, even though I think they only have one Pokemon with inaccurate moves and they even have a no guard mon.
Yeah, okay. So the biggest upsides of this team, in my opinion, are the defensive core and the cleaning. I think Clefable, Slowking G, and Skarmory are insane defensive core. Can be very tough to break. Some of the fattest mons in the format, and they do really well with typings together. And I think Zeraora, Cinderace, Shell Smash Cloyster, even Mega Pidgeot, because it's so fast, are some really great cleaning options for this team. But it's going to really struggle to break. It's my biggest issue.
Yeah, you're basically reliant on choosing something or attempting some kind of bulk up setup with Zero or Cinderace, because there isn't any one, like, the biggest immediate breaking power is Exploud and then Cinderace, which is fine, but you'd really like more. But my biggest issue with this team is that, unlike basically every other team, it does not really have a top 6 that you're going to be bringing to every game. It has a top 5 basically in Zeraora, Cinderace, Skarm, Clef, Glowking, and then what? Like, all of these other mons are fine, but typically in low tiers you wouldn't be bringing all that much, so you're always gonna have something that's notably worse than the rest of your team. Like, your sixth best Bon is Pidgeot, and that's probably gonna be the sixth in most games because this team's special breaking ability is also a bit lacking.
This team does do a very good job at both setting hazards and keeping them off the field. However, Cloyster, Skarm got spikes. You have Court Change, you have Defog and Rapid Spin. It's got good options for the hazard games though, so that could chip some teams down enough for this team to actually clean very well.
No, yeah, definitely. The one possible concern could be that Cloyster and Skarmory are both two mons that have very low speed def and an electric type weakness, so Clef is probably gonna run Stealth Rock more than you like. But it can still do that pretty solidly, so this team shouldn't have much of a problem with that, and the removal is nice.
Slowking G is also the one of the best special just swallow hits of all time.
Pretty much, yeah. Has good synergy with those two as well.
All right, we can move on to, was it number 13 now?
I'm gonna let you try to pronounce this one.
I'm just gonna say Jelp. So we have Jelp in the Blazing Ponytas.
Coward.
I'm not going for the full name. I'm sorry. I do not know how to pronounce your full username. I've been considering it forever. So this team, Regen Core, you got the Tangrowth Toxapex with some other nice defensive pieces like Cofagrigus and Donphan and Metagross to take some hits really well, and then the offense on Urshifu and Gardevoir can just physically and specially break a lot of things. However, that's kind of the end of the offense for me, is the top two. So
Yeah, Swallow is nice offense when it can be justified to be brought instead of any of these other very good mons. Like, basically, anything that's Gardevoir or slower, aside from the Colossal, is all better than Swallow, so it's gonna struggle to fit on teams. Donphan and Metagross do have offensive sets as well, but this team is really gonna prefer them in defensive roles, especially because when you look at this team, there's really not that much special defense going on, so aside from the Toxapex, of course. So an Assaultless Donphan or Metagross are gonna go a long way on this team.
also, I mentioned earlier that the offense is only really Urshifu and Gardevoir. However, I will be really excited if, due to the bulk of this team, we get to see more offensive Metagross, like Agility Weakness Policy, or even like Banded Donphan. That'd be really cool if we get to see those come.
Oh yeah, those two are gonna be important pieces on this team because they can do a lot, and I think that otherwise their team is kind of straightforward with ones like Gardevoir or Urshifu. Like with Urshifu, you just get the item and that's about it. But what Donphan and Metagross end up doing is probably gonna shape the games the most, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, I think we can move on to our number 12 team,
Hey, I know this guy.
which I know this guy too. It happens to be me.
Right then,
So
I
it's,
guess we've been taking turns talking about teams, so I'm gonna go over this one.
yeah, please.
Right then, so this team is pretty solid bulky offense without a lot of problems. This is already where the teams start being such that they can't point at one big glaring thing that's wrong with them. This is like where they're all pretty alright. They have some weaknesses, but they can work around them. In this case, that's gonna be the speed. 110 on Mega Diancie to 85 on Rillaboom is a massive gap that like anything, all the 100s to 105s can abuse that pretty easily. Those team
Hmm.
does have some pretty alright Scarfers in Rillaboom itself, of course, and also its priority, Necrozma and Buzzwole, and I guess the other issue would be special defense in that Rilla, Necrozma, Buzzwole are all pretty good physical defense, but there's not a lot going on for special defense beyond Celesteela and Lantern. But they are good assault vest users as well, so like you can work around that.
I think one of the bigger issues is another big issue is the rock resist. The only rock resist is Mudstale. Having a steel that doesn't resist rock kind of hurts this team. Yeah.
Yeah,
However,
this is a team with only two removers. The best is
mm-hmm.
Talonflame, and there isn't a good rock resist. So as soon as that thing, so there's a lot of pressure on it, and as soon as Talonflame gets knocked off, that's kind of the ball game.
Yeah, I do, however, think grassy terrain synergy is pretty good. Mudsdale appreciates the beneficial recovery and can run high horsepower. Lantern loves grassy terrain, and so does Mega DNC. So I like that I drafted that. I got to draft that together.
Oh yeah, definitely. Also makes Lantern a more justifiable bring, so you can deal with your lack of special defense well. And of course, options like Calm Mind Necrozma, Calm Mind Diancie, and such do always exist.
Hmm. All right, I think we can move on for my team.
Yeah.
I believe next we have Freaky Dude's team. The Abilene Absols. I think that's how it's pronounced. Um, So we are looking at the team before transactions. Obviously, there are transactions that were done to this team, um, but we're just going based off the draft.
Yeah,
I
for
think this
simplicity's
team,
sake, we're looking at what you had after Grace ended, especially because Freaky Dude's transactions already are effective. Harbor made some trades that are not effective yet, so it would be kind of weird to like. It's hard to pick a point where to talk about, so we're just gonna pretend this is week one. Alright? Alright.
yeah, yeah, before, yeah. So I think with this team, one of the bigger issues is there's a giant speed tier gap. This one was, where was it from? I have to look specifically.
100 to 60, basically. Like nothing under Volcarona ever runs speed. You could
Mm-hmm.
pretend that the fact Miltank never runs speed means it's like a pretend base 80, but like not really. It's just a huge speed gap. Fortunately, this team does have a lot of innate speed. Like the top
Mm-hmm.
four are all very fast mons, so at the top end you're fine, but mid tier speed breakers are gonna be able to run offense boosting abilities for free, or natures for free.
Yeah, I think some of the breaking on this team is really scary. I mean, Thunderous, Landorus on the special side do really well. Weavile on the physical side is really scary, and then the defensive core can hold up its own. Although you maybe want a better cleric, it's still pretty sturdy.
Yeah, one thing you could mention is that this team doesn't have the greatest physical presence, in that, like, okay,
Hmm.
body press aggron is something, Weavile is good, and then you kind of don't have a lot because Verizian's attack stat is only base 90, I think. Though
Yeah.
Landorus and Thunderous do have mixed sets, so that's fine. The one big concern with this team right now is the lack of special defense. Aggron, Miltank, and Weezing are all wonderful physically offensive pieces that synergize well with each other, but for special defense you're kind of only down to Slowking, so when Slowking can't do its job or if it gets caught off guard, you're really in trouble.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, I think we talked about that enough. On to the next team.
And that's gonna be Berg with the Montana Glalies, and this was probably the team we talked about the most when it comes to where we're gonna rank it, in that this team has. This is probably the most difficult team to use. there are some no-brainer sets, but you've got Deoxys Speed, you've got Silvally, and those things are gonna change set and even typing basically every game. You also have to pivot that Mega Mawile pretty well, otherwise it's kind of just gonna go kill for kill in most games. And you have very versatile tools like the Moltres, the Manaphy, the Zarude, so this team has incredibly high potential, but if you're just looking at it, also has a lot of failure points in case you bring the wrong sets, in case you make a misprediction, in case of things like that. So it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I think this is a very neutral team. It has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of risk behind it.
Yeah, it's all gonna come in power rankings. Like the most important things is always the coach behind the team. In this case, more so than any other. Excited to see what Bergs makes of this one.
I agree. All right, I think we are now on number 9, which we have Chandy with the OK Boomer Chandelures. This this team is scary. It has a lot of good mons that can just beat you down. As I think Kyurem Greninja Blacephalon on the special side is disgusting. With Mega Main, it's pretty hard on the special side too. I think Landorus, while it's the only physical breaker, really it's pretty strong if you can run physical sets where you're more offensive. However, I think one of the biggest issues on this team is going to be the fact that Landorus is the only defogger, and defog is kind of important because you don't want to have to run Boots Kyurem or Boots Blasef every week. I think main as your only flying resist hurts a little bit. But besides that, I think this team is going to outpressure a lot of teams, especially on the special side.
Yeah, also worth mentioning about the Landorus is that it's also the team's only ground resist, and I would say the only reliable fighting resist. Because yes, there are 4 things that resist or are immune to fighting here, but Blacephalon is made out of paper. Slowbro Galar faces the 50-50 of do you want to run Shuka for Earthquake or Colbur for knockoffs, and Toxic Rogue also isn't the tankiest thing around, so it's kind of just Landorus to switch into fighting types, and if those have Ice Punch, you just really don't have anything.
Yeah, I think this team it's pretty solid, and it will definitely just outbreak some teams. But I think the Blissey might be able to sit on this team for a very long time if Landorus is forced to run defensive.
Yeah, and the one thing is that while this team is a bit lacking in physical offense, I'm also gonna say that Greninja, Blacephalon, Kyurem, and Grimmsnarl all have potent physical sets as well, so it really depends on what you feel like in the week. And fortunately, the momentum on this team is a bit sparse, but like just enough to be considered good to get this team around. You have a Flipton Vaporeon, and the wishes are really gonna matter on this team. There isn't a ton of manual regen going on, but Vaporeon is a really good wisher. And you have that slow momentum to get into your fast mons, most of which have their own fast offensive momentum, so this team can play the long game pretty well as well.
Also, dual screens with this amount of offense, really, really scary. You have Kyurem taking way more hits than it should, and Greninja and Blacephalon taking 1 or 2 hits instead of just getting O-code. And behind screens, that's pretty nice for this team, because some of these mods can just snowball at the late game.
Oh yeah, that also opens the door for things like Dragon Dance, Physical Kyurem, and the like.
Yeah, that's a very scary set. Alright, so now we are gracing the top 8.
And that's gonna be Aussie with the Taillow triple threat. Your standard Sand team, except they were 8th in the draft order and they still managed to get a Mew. I'm extremely jealous about that.
Disgusting.
Yeah, so this is a pretty solid team. If you look at the speed spread, it's kind of odd that this is rather gapless. You have Crobat to Cavalion, but like that's a bit negligible, especially because it's a Sand team. So like realistically double the speed of Excadrill and Solitaire, so this is a pretty fast team. It also has a Mew, which you never know what that thing's gonna do until it starts doing it. It's a pretty good Sand team, but it falls for some of the trappings of the typical Sand team, which is not having great ground checks, not having great ice checks, and in this case, ground is especially problematic because you can see that the resists are Sarina, which isn't going to be bulky for long because it can't synthesize in sand, and then two birds which one of them can defog most of the time, but you're probably still going to run boots on them, so this team is pretty notably edge quick weak. Milotic
Mm-hmm.
is by far the most reliable ball, but nowadays I think people agree that Flame Orb is Milotic's best set, and that's really difficult to do on sand because it means you're basically taking sand and burn and possibly hazards every single time you switch in, and that really wears you down.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
One other flaw you could say this team has is that the special offense isn't all that present. It's Mew, Togekiss, and that's about it, really. There are some mixed mons that like Dracozolt and Tyranitar, but they do prefer being
Mm-hmm.
physical. I'm not gonna discount that because we've all been hacked by Scarf Togekiss in this life, and Mew has a lot of special sets as well. But all in all, it's just a very solid sand team. It's
Yeah.
only 8th because a lot of the other teams that we have above this are all very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of,
Uh, Moving on now. Give me a second.
my sheet broke again. God damn it.
Oh Lord. Moving on to number 7 here. Sorry, this is technical difficulties. Number 7 we have Shinrai. Or Shinra, I'm not the best. We have Shinra with the Brighton and Hove Ambipom.
Right, this
So
was an interesting team because I initially had it in my top 3, but the more I looked at it, the more it's like it's a bit of a cheerleader effect going on. You look at the top 4, and those are really good mons. I'm glad he
mhm,
managed to get them. And then you kind of look at the rest of the team and they're like, that's okay. This team has a solid top 6. It's gonna bring most of top 7. It's gonna bring most of the time.
7, yeah.
In Spectre, Zama, Zygarde, Lele, Rotom, Chansey, and Slowbro, and then the rest of the Pokemon don't really exist.
Well, the Spectre definitely exists, but I think
Did they not list it?
no, you did not. Well, you
No,
might have.
sorry.
I don't know. I didn't hear it.
The first
I
five
think this
things,
team.
Chansey and Slowbro.
Yeah, I think this team is really on the bulky side. I mean, Mega Slowbro, Chansey, Rotom Heat, they're all going to take hits really well. You have Zama to switch into those fairy types. You also have Zama switching to Nox, which is really nice because besides that, this team is pretty knock weak. I mean, Slowbro can switch into Nox, I guess, too. Um, I
Yeah,
think,
the things
I,
that really bring this team down and that brought it down from my first initial impression is one, the absolutely massive speed gap of 128 to 95. So like
mhm.
all of the many 110s can run boosting natures for free, and also the fact that help, my brain froze. What else did we not like about this team?
Oh, we didn't like the bottom three. Bishop on this team kind of feels negligible. I feel like you could get a better dark. Togetic, while it will come for its good bulk, having two Eviolite mons, if you're both bringing them both, is kind of not the best. And also, Lurantis kind of probably never comes.
Right, yeah.
Also, this team kind of struggles from only being able to bring six mons, considering you want to bring all top seven of them. So that can be a little bit of an issue. It's going to be hard to pick something to bench each week. But offensively, this team is really scary on both sides. You have Lele and Spectre, which can just clean or break on both. On the special side, you have Zygarde, which is just a massive setup or banded threat. And you have Zamazenta, which just has an insane attack stat for no reason and can also run Howl. And just, yeah.
Right. The one thing I'm gonna point out that makes this team really odd, in my opinion, is that it's a Bishop Zygarde team with a Lele. So
Mm-hmm.
those speed gaps could have been covered by good priority on this team, but the Lele just shuts them down completely, which does help. It does mean you can't Sucker Punch the Spectre, but I think it's a net loss on this team. Granted, you can play around with that, it's your terrain, you're the one setting it, you can control it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely something that you're gonna find hindering you.
Yeah. I mean, it should not be that big of a deal, but it's just a little off.
Yeah,
Okay, we
as
can move
said, I had this
on.
team in my top 3 at first, but the competition gets stiff up here.
Yeah, it's really stiff up here. This next team is I believe it's KaiWhai's Malcoded MissingNo.
I'm not sure if
Yeah.
it's meant to be that or KaiWhai, so I'm
Oh,
just gonna refer
KaiWhai.
to them as the MissingNo.
Yeah, I just said Kai. So Tornty, Rotom Wash, Mega Medi, Heatran, Swampert. Ew. That's what I'm gonna say. You have a ton of momentum into Mega Medi. You have Heatran, which can just really switch into some of the things that like Rotom Wash and Torn don't like. It's a very good. I think Torn, T, Rotom Wash, and Heatran cover each other's weaknesses really well. And yeah, I mean I've drafted something at least between those three, and I enjoyed it. And I think getting this Mega Medi in is really scary. I think on the special side, it's a bit lacking though. You have mons like Tornty, Rotom Wash, and Heatran, which can all run special. However, some weeks they're going to be forced to run bulky. I think Slurpuff is going to really struggle to pick a role here. Sometimes it's going to want to bring webs, sometimes it's going to want to wish. And it can do those things, but it might want to do more than one a week, and that might be a little trouble. I think speed tiers are pretty solid here.
Yeah, the speed tiers are solid, and as you say, special offense can be a bit of a question mark, but this team does have enough raw bulk across the board that I do believe Heatran and Rotom are going to be able to run offensive sets more than they
Mm-hmm.
usually get to do on this team. It's odd that there's so much pressure on the Slurpuff because, as you said, it's Webs, it's Wish, those are all really good options for this team, especially because this team is kind of lacking in manual recovery. A Slurp of
Mm-hmm.
Kamala does mean two wishes, but they're both low tiers with many different sets, so how long this team gets to stay around depends on what those two are doing in those weeks, and of course, Donate is pivoting around. So that's a bit
Yeah.
hard to assess. The main thing I don't like about this team are the bottom two mons. You have a Mega Medi team, and your Dark, Ghost, and Bug never come to games. And
Mm-hmm.
even when
Yeah.
they do not do damage. So it's gonna be difficult for you to spam stab with those. You might unironically use Baton Pass Medicham sometimes because this team's gonna have some problems with killing bulky psychic types.
Yeah, Mega Medi is known for being walled by bulky psychics and bulky ghosts, and you really don't have it. Normally, you would want a mon that can like either like break those down or like just sit on them, and you really don't have that on this team. Like,
Yeah, it can Zen headbutt ghosts at least, I guess, but when it comes to psychics, it's like, yeah, just like toxic and switch out, which
yeah, that's a
isn't great.
yeah. I think I think we've said enough about their
Yeah, we
KaiWhai's
can
team.
move on to Lynn and the Washington Wishiwashi. My sheet broke again. Rizzo,
Okay,
fix your
well,
sheets. Why can't I copy paste from them?
this is, in my opinion, how to draft removal with a Mega Charizard team. Coco, Gliscor, Scizor, Rotom has removal, Hitmonlee has removal. This is how to draft removal with Megazard. Um, I,
Absolutely. While this isn't a list of a lot of willing defoggers and spinners, all of them, there is six of them. Something is gonna be able to fit the removal on any given week, so it's fine.
yeah,
It also has
yeah,
wonderful hazard setting, which is able to force the opponents to defog for you.
I think it has great pivots. You have Gliscor, Slowbro, or you can get this Megazard in. You also have Coco. You have great fast pivots. You have a couple slow pivots. I think we talked about earlier the double grounds being good on this team because Gliscor and Seismitoad don't necessarily want to sit there. Gliscor has good recovery, but Size doesn't. So having them both as options to switch into electric type attacks is very nice. They don't really share a weakness besides freeze dry, but that's every ground type. Um,
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd doubling when it comes to double water, in that they're both very bulky waters. Typically, when I see double
mhm.
water, it's one bulky, one offensive. But this is the goal here was probably double ground, and you did a good job on that. You
Yeah,
would
there's
have been
no
in trouble when it
overwhelming.
comes to rock types otherwise, so having a toad there and not just Lee as your solo resist is very good.
Yeah, I think also having like great grass resist like Scizor and Mega Charizard X really help that. So that there's no ground weakness. Um, you mentioned earlier Hazard saying on this team is pretty good. You have good options. You have Toad. You have Gliscor. You can also run spikes on Roselia. There's some nice little niche options like Coco plus Hitmonlee for some E-Seed stuff. I think this team is. I think it's going to perform well, and it's going to be pretty hard to break. I think.
Yeah, I was a bit generous in calling it wonderful hazard setting, but it's perfectly sufficient. And yeah, this team can deliver offense from a lot of different angles, even without talking
Hmm.
about all of the setup it has. Like, this team is gonna be able to facilitate even Source Dance score a good bit of the time, so
Hmm.
excited to see where it goes. The
I
one
think
thing
the
could be
only.
a bit of a
Oh,
lack of special defense, but with size method and such, it should be fine.
I was going to mention a lack of special offense because the only real special breaker being Coco. But those are like the end of my complaints and kind of nitpicky.
Yeah, pretty much. And even Coco has things like madness and the like, so it can get around those
Hmm.
things. Like, that is
All
a flaw with this team. There is going to be a lot of physical defense against this team, but you first of all need to be able to get past those walls and then think about actually doing something against this team.
right.
With all of its momentum, it's going to be controlling the pace of the match a lot of the time.
I agree. Okay, so moving into the top four.
With Paraic and the Shannon Shaymins.
Yes, I personally really like this team. However, we talked about it more and we kind of worked its way down into a place we saw fit for it. I think offensively, Aegislash, Latios, Megalop, Zapdos can run offensive on this team because of its good bulk. Shell Smash Stoise, Webs can come occasionally. It's pretty nice. The bulk here is nice with Hippo, Blastoise, Zapdos. Umbreon can pass those wishes. Roserade for good hazards and just to be a hindrance. I think this team is rather. I think it's strong personally.
Yeah, I do like this team as well. The number one thing that kept me from putting it higher is that it's not the most versatile of teams. Like,
Hmm.
Latios, Zapdos, Aegislash all can run different sets basically every week. And that's about it. You have defensive versus Shell Smash Blastoise, but other than that, when Umbreon hits the field, you immediately know what it's gonna do. When Hippo does, you
Hmm.
immediately know what it's gonna do. Lopunny, basically the same. Ribombee, sometimes it gets the Quiver Dance. But this team isn't gonna surprise a lot of people. Like, you can look at it in the team builder and you know this is what it's got. And what it's got is very good, but it is a bit limited in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's why I kind of took it from where I had it. But I still do think it's a very solid team.
Oh, definitely. It is the fourth.
Hmm. Okay, moving into the top three now, and we have Delp or Tyler with the Southern Sandslash.
They applied as Delp and that has better mouthfeel, so I'm gonna go with that.
Okay, yeah, I just yeah.
Right then, so pretty solid bulky offense team. It does have probably the biggest weakness to any one type that we've seen so far in the
Hmm.
five ground weaknesses. Never mind that accounts for Groudon Primal. I'm gonna delete that real quick. Forgot I had that
It's
there. Scratch that. Right then, so this is a pretty nice bulky offensive team. It has a lot of threats all around. It does have very good setup potential as well. Like, beyond just Gengar and Victini being great attackers that can punch a hole into things right away, you also have the Como, you have the Scissor, you do have a Azumarill, which is most likely gonna be banded most of the time, but it does have setup sets as well. There's always Rock Polish Weakness Policy Rhyperior.
hmm
The weaknesses on this team really mainly come from types and the like, because if you look at it,
hmm
like, that ground weakness is still extant even if you remove the Primal Groudon. Sorry about that. It does have four weaknesses, only two resists. One of them is the Leafeon, which I do not see coming on a team this stacked. So
I
it's only
agree.
really down to the Mandibuzz, which is also the most reliable Dark check and the most reliable Defogger. Granted, you can switch an Azumarill or a Como into Dark type sometimes, Scizor can defog sometimes, but Mandibuzz really is a central piece of this team.
Yeah, I think it is. I think another thing that kind of hurts this team is the speed tiers. Voltund is good at 122, I believe. However, I don't think it's going to come, which renders Gengar as your fastest option. which is good, but it might force you to run Scarf Gengar Victini a couple weeks, which are both great sets, but they can get a bit predictable and they do less damage than their other counterparts.
Yeah, having a likely mon that comes a lot and ties based 110s is passable. We've seen better speed, this is sufficient. You've gotten through the door, but there are gonna be teams faster than you. You do have setup options like whatever setup of the week Como chooses, Flame Charge Victini and the like. You do have two good priority users. It's just gonna be a thing of not letting something faster set up and sweep you instead, especially if Mandibus and Blissey have been whittled. Which, by the way, this team does have a lot of good raw bulk, but the actual bulky mons, the actual walls on this team boil down to Mandibus, Scissor, and Blissey. And Scissor and Blissey do have rather exploitable gaps, of course, in physical fighting types and fire coverage, so once again, a lot of pressure on that Mandibus.
Yes.
This team has a lot of potential, it just has to be piloted well.
I completely agree. I think it's a very scary team, and I'm not looking forward to playing it this week.
Good luck, buddy.
Thank you. I'm gonna need it. We're moving into our top two with number 2, which is Ariana with Ariana's Altarias. Top end speed is crazy on this team with Mega Arrow and Dragapult. Then you have a nice regen core with Amoonguss, Mienshao. You have good. Just I feel like everything is just good. Everything is really solid, and every mon is fairly versatile. I feel.
Yeah, pretty much everything
down to like the bottom couple.
Yeah, pretty much everything here except for the arrow can run a lot of different sets. I guess the one failure point of this team is the Rotom Frost, in that in a team this stacked, it's not going to come much, and that's unfortunate because it leaves this team with basically a 100 to 71 speed gap, and that the 71 is a Sandaconda, so like try to scare people with Flame Charge Incineroar so they run speed for that, I guess. But if you don't bring the Rotom much, or if people don't prep for the Rotom, then that is a pretty exploitable gap, which does allow people to use more offensive natures to get past your otherwise really good bulk. I mean, the Water Fire Grass core here is lovely. But it also brings us to Amoonguss being a grass that does not resist ground, and then when we look at this team, the ground checks are Rotom and Aerodactyl, and that's probably going to be a problem whenever you're fighting a good ground type, because Rotom already struggles to come, and Aerodactyl of course can't run boots to set off the rock's weakness. And speaking of ground checks, those two are also your only two defoggers, so that's really gonna be a problem when choice grounds and the like come up. This team does have a lot of good raw bulk, it of course has Amoonguss and the like, so we can deal with them, but there are still some flaws here, offsetting an otherwise excellent team.
Yeah, one last thing that I want to mention is this team isn't the biggest fan of switching to knock. Like, yeah, you have Mienshao. Probably doesn't. Sometimes it can lose its item. Incineroar doesn't really want to lose its item. Prim can switch in if you don't mind, and Amoonguss. It's like there's a lot of mods that don't want to lose their item.
Yeah, between knocking off leftovers and the troubled defog situation, this team's ability to play the long game is worse than it looks on paper, because you're not gonna have leftovers a lot of the time, and if we look at it, like, the manual recovery on this team is kind of just Amoonguss. Whenever Aerodactyl tries to roost, it has a 50% chance of just being killed for it, so Wishiwashi is gonna be rather important to keep this team healthy, which it can afford to be on this team.
I completely agree. I think this team has a lot of pressure and a lot of versatility, and it can. You really just won't know what's coming bulky. Like, we can see bulky Primarina in like an Urshifu matchup. We can see bulkier offensive Incineroar, bulky Jirachi, Scarf Jirachi, other Jirachis. Like, there's a lot of mods that can do a lot of things, and it's really, really nice on this team, I think.
Absolutely.
Lots of momentum, too.
This is one of the most versatile teams.
Lots of momentum to get in, like Arrow and Mienshao, which can just momentum out more, or even the Bouffalant, Banded Bouffalant coming through.
Don't pretend that it exists. I love Bouffalant, but let's be real here.
Alright, and now what we've all been waiting for, the number one team in our eyes. These are all just opinions, but we have Shade with the Houston Gallades.
This is a wonderful bulky offense team, and it's exactly the kind of stuff I like drafting, so yeah, of course I like the team as well. But the one thing you could really say about this team that's kind of lacking is the speed, in that it's another one of those teams that has the top end at 110, which is okay. It does have a lot of decent speed setup options with Herb Nihilego and Dragon Dance or Scale Shot Hydreigon. It also has some Scarfers and Rotom
It has
Hydreigon
some
and
really
the
good
like.
scarf options.
Yeah,
Really good scarf options.
yeah, but other than that, this team can take a lot of hits. It has just about enough recovery. It has wonderful offensive synergy in Hydreigon killing Psychics for Gallade, which kills Steel types for Nihilego, which kills Rock types for Entei, and it just works out really well. One thing that is a bit concerning in the type matchup is that Finny and Corviknight are, of course, the two Dragon Resists, and they both share an electric weakness. So pay attention to that. So that you don't lose to like a Choice Latios just spamming Stab and T-Bolt all the time.
I
But the
think,
raw bulk on this team should be able to keep you running.
yeah, well, there is a lot of bulk. I think the only other issue I see typing wise is the only rock resist being Mega Gallade could lean to be a little bit of an issue because you don't want to switch into a whole ton of attacks with Gallade. Well, it can take some. You don't. It being your only rock resist it can be a little rough.
Yeah, that, and this team's recovery is okay, but not great, and Gallade in particular, like, Gallade doesn't run Wish. You do not want that thing to get worn down. There's also a bit of a problem in Hydreigon being the only ghost resist, and a lot of ghosts get Dazzle, so you're really gonna have to be careful about that. Though hopefully the raw bulk is gonna help you live Shadow Balls, it's not that big of a move.
Yeah, this team is very scary and I think very, very solid all around.
Yeah, its main problem is possibly how long it can last, but it has enough recovery, it does have good removal, it does have a lot of good breaking power and setup options in stuff like Corviknight and Finny, in bulky setup I mean. So this team is likely going to be able to end games before things start to drag out too long.
Yeah, it's a very high pressure like team, and yeah, it's that's it. That's all 16 teams.
That's all of them.
Hmm.
Right then, so as I said, all of these teams are functional, all of these teams are good, every one of you can be a competitor, every one of you has a good chance of taking the title. All it comes down to is prep smart, play smart, and good luck.
Yeah, good luck everyone. Thank you for listening to us. If you listened all the way through, which I doubt, because everyone just skips to their own team.
I'm probably gonna put timestamps for teams and the like.
Oh, you're you're a saint.
I'm saying this now in the video so that I'm forced to put them, so that he can't make an
Hey.
excuse to weasel out of it.
Also, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, you've been wonderful to work with, but let's end this video now.
All right, have a good one.